Today's date is Friday, December the 8th, 2023. My name is Crispin Brooks. I'm interviewing Helga Judah on behalf of the USC Shoah Foundation. The interview is taking place in the USC Shoah Foundation's offices in Los Angeles, California, United States of America. And the language of the interview will be English.
Right.
Please state your name.
My name is Helga Judah.
And what was your name at birth?
I was born Kuznetsky.
And what did people call you growing up?
Helgachen.
Did you have any nicknames?
No, that's a diminutive of Helga, really.
And is there any special significance to your name?
Not really. I was born in Berlin, and I think at the time it was a fashionable name.
Were you named after anyone?
No.
Please tell us when you were born.
I was born on the 16th of September, 1931 in Berlin.
That was my next question. Where were you born? So you were born in Berlin. And do you know where in Berlin you were born?
Not really.
A particular hospital or?
No, I can't remember that.
And please tell us your parents' names.
My father was Samuel Kuznetsky. My mother was Esther Kuznetsky.
And did you have any siblings?
I was the youngest of 3.
And what were your other siblings' names?
My older sister was almost 12 years older than me. Her name was Dora. And then 6 years later, my mother had them every 6 years almost. So the next one was Clary, and then it was me.
And what do you know about your family history before you were born? How your parents met and things like that?
My parents met in Germany. They were about 18, 19 years old. And they were quite modest at the time. And they got married and had their first child. And it was a tough life for them.
In what way?
There wasn't too much money. My father had to work very hard. It was in Berlin. It was winter, cold. And he slowly worked himself up. By the time I was born what they say with a golden spoon in my mouth.
And what was your father's work? What was his job?
He worked in textile.
And doing what exactly?
He was selling materials for suits.
And was this a family business or did he work for others?
No. He worked for himself.
And what do you know about his background, where he came from and his parents?
I don't know too much. In those days, parents didn't tell too much about themselves to the children. It's not like it is now. And I know he was born in Poland, and so was my mother. And his mother died from childbirth. And so his father married again. And so he had stepbrothers or half brothers. I don't know quite what you call it.
And his mother died giving birth to him or another?
I don't know if it was to him or to another child. That's all I know.
And do you know what happened to his parents, your grandparents on that side?
They all died in the Holocaust. There was nobody left.
Did you ever meet them? Do you know?
No, I never did.
And on your mother, what did she do?
My mother was what they call today a housewife.
And do you know much about her parents or anything about her parents that you know of?
No, don't know anything about her parents.
And she was Metzger, is that right? Was
Yes,
her maiden
yes.
name? Tell us, if you can, what is your very, very earliest memory?
My earliest memory, well, I had my first day in school, which I have a picture with me, and that was in 1937. And I remember I used to go with my older sister, but I remember coming home alone. So the school, I think, was not too far from home. And I remember children crossing the street. It was winter and they had gloves on. They slapped my face with mud because I had dark hair and dark eyes and I was Jewish. I don't think after that I went to school anymore. And my next memory is running like a kid runs and falling down and hurting my knee. And it was quite bad. But at that time, the Jewish doctors were not allowed to practice anymore. So I remember going to the doctor's house, but walking into the kitchen to make believe we were like friends. And the doctor took care of my knee, bandaged it, and said to leave it alone for 3 days. And what happened then is that they didn't have antibiotics, obviously, in those days, and it infected. And that became a whole terrible thing because by then I'll end up in a hospital. And obviously it was not a Jewish hospital. And how I'll end up in the hospital, I really don't know. But it was not a children's hospital because I remember being with 2 paralyzed women in the same room. And I don't know also how long I stayed there. It was quite a while. When it was visiting day, I always used to lift my head to see if my father was still around. Coming back, because I remember something before that, my father was quite well known and they had advised him that he shouldn't be in the house because the Nazis were apprehending all the men at that time. And I remember the Nazis coming in my room when I was sleeping, putting on the light and looking at the closets and under my bed. So after that, that's when I fell down and I landed up in the hospital. And that was very traumatic. And I don't know how long I stayed there, but I wasn't getting any better. My whole skin kept coming down, out my legs, everything. It became like raw. I became like, I guess the infection was running down. But there was one nurse that she had some cream, and whenever she put that on, it felt better. Eventually, I told this to my parents, and they took me out of the hospital, plus the nurse also, and they brought her home, and she treated me at home. And obviously, I became cured because it was either all of us were leaving or nobody was going away. I also remember it must have been Kristallnacht, but I didn't know it at the time. And I remember walking the streets and seeing all these glass on the floor and being very careful not to step on the glass. And those are my memories in a nutshell.
I wanted to go back a moment and ask you about if you have any memories of where you lived in Berlin. Do you have a picture in your head that you could describe
Yes,
for us?
the place is still there. I went to Germany with my husband about 9 years ago. I didn't want to go, but then they were paying for us to come back to Germany, and my husband wanted to go. So I went back to Germany and I visited the place. Also, I went back with my daughter and my grandson and her husband to see the place where I used to live. And it's still there.
Do you know the street that it's on, or which part
Yes,
of Berlin?
It's called Alte Schönhauser Straße, Number 4.
And which part of Berlin is that in?
It was east.
And going back to when you were a small child, what memories do you have of your life there? What pictures come to you when you think about that place?
I think what I remember the most is really being slapped on the face and landing up in the hospital, terrified as a kid, and how I was treated in the hospital.
And is that's separate from the infection?
That is the infection. Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit in more detail what you remember of the being slapped and those children? What happened there?
Nothing. I guess I ran home. And these are all memories that stay for life with you.
Was it a lot of children that did this, or do you know?
A few, not a lot. Probably 4 or 5.
And do you remember what they said?
No.
Do you know anything of the early years outside of these kind of incidents of anti-Semitism and the infection in the hospital? Do you remember anything about your family life? You know, life at home, being in the home with your sisters, or anything like that? Or was your older sister already out of the home by that time?
No, we were all together.
Do you remember, were there meals together, or how did it work?
Yeah, in Europe, usually people would sit together for lunch and have a hot lunch, and it was just a sandwich for dinner. Yes, I remember the family always sitting together for lunch.
Would your father come home from work for lunch?
He had his business in another part of where we lived, so it wasn't that he had to commute. It was part of the house where we lived.
Other than immediate family members, was anyone else in the house? Was there a maid or a governess or anything like that?
I don't remember.
And how would you describe, or do you remember any friends from that time who you played with?
No, all I remember that I had a bird. And I tried to make the bird my dog, so I would put a little piece of string in his mouth and try to walk the bird.
And do you know, were there ever people come to the house, like friends of your parents or your sisters?
Yes, yes.
And did your family, did the people they sort of socialize with, were they mainly Jewish or non-Jewish or a mixture?
I think they were mainly Jewish. I remember in particular there was one couple and the husband, I think it was in the very early days, because he was put in concentration camp and he came out. And I remember he came to visit and he had a shaved head. And that must have been the very, very early when they would apprehend the people and then still let them out. I don't know.
Do you remember his name?
Tschürbach.
And how would you describe your family's religious observance? Or was there observance? What kind of things did you do or didn't you do?
Yes, we had separate dishes for meat and for milk. And I remember my mother doing a lot of cleaning for Passover. And I remember once I came home with some cheese I think I had bought, and she felt bad for me and she sent me up to the attic to eat it there.
Do you have any memories of particular holidays from those early years in Berlin?
Only Hanukkah, because we used to get a plate with chocolates, nuts, marzipan, and all kind of goodies, so that was a good memory.
Do you remember any visits to synagogue?
Very vaguely. I don't know which holiday it was really, but I remember walking with a little flag and an apple on top of it. So what it was, I don't know. And since I was born September, I think it was either Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur, which happens right now every few years.
You mentioned that your dad was successful, and that by the time you were born, how would you describe your family socioeconomically from your understanding when you were born?
I understand that they were extremely well to do.
And in what way would that have been obvious? Was that did your family have a car, or with the place they lived? Was it a particular area, or what would that mean?
I don't know how to explain in those days as a child. All I know is by the time we went to Brazil, we immigrated. Maybe I'm going too much ahead of it, but my father had a building with 30 units. So I take it that he was well to do.
And going back for a moment and just thinking what you just said before, do you remember any birthday celebrations?
Birthday celebration was always a huge thing in my family. And there was one birthday, we had a huge, what do you call those pianos for concert?
Like a grand piano?
A grand piano. We had a grand piano. And I wanted, in the worst way, I wanted a little scooter. And so I got up early morning and I saw that grand piano all full of goodies and clothes and all kind of presents. And I felt a little disappointed. And then near the window, I tripped on something, and that was my scooter. So forever, up to now, our birthdays are always something very big is made out of our birthdays.
And would there be a number of people there, a lot of people, or just the family?
I don't remember that, no.
Are there any special foods from those days that you remember?
No, the only thing I remember is there used to be a man that used to come with a suitcase of chocolate and sell it to my mother. He used to come at the door. And my mother said that as a small kid still in a stroller, that I would only eat if it was a certain brand of chocolate. If it wasn't that brand, it wasn't good for me. And so every night before going to bed, my poor teeth, I don't know how they survived, my mother would give me a piece of chocolate. She would buy from this man a lot of chocolate, put it down in the closet, and every night I would get a piece of chocolate.
When you think about your life back then, did you spend most of your time inside your home, or were there trips outside, or trips to a park, or anything like that?
I remember going with my mother to resorts. I remember also going to, I forgot the name, it was summertime, Wannsee. It was Wannsee. And in winter we went to some winter resorts, which I absolutely hated, the cold. And I have some pictures of that with me too.
What do you remember about the summer resort in Vanse?
Little fruits and little bugs and going in the water. That's about it.
How about the winter resorts?
Oh, it was dreadful.
In what way?
I hated the cold. I hated the food. And I remember going with my mother. How do you call these things where the kids sit and go down the
Like a sleigh or a sled?
sleigh, yeah. And going there and freezing, bad circulation, my hands frozen, my feet frozen. It was not my cup of tea.
Do you remember where that was? It wasn't in Vanse, it was in some other place.
Some other place, I don't remember the name. Maybe near Czechoslovakia somewhere. It could have been.
And in sort of normal life during the year when you weren't at the resorts, what kind of sort of daily activities would there have been?
I can't remember too much.
Were there trips out to a park or any like theatre or?
Probably. But I only have the memories that I mentioned, unfortunately.
And I wanted to ask, in terms of your parents, what do you know of their kind of political outlook? Did they ever sort of give you any idea who they liked or disliked in terms of politics at that time?
Don't know.
And did you or perhaps your sisters ever join any youth groups or anything like that?
Not that I know about. The only thing that I remember was my mother trying to get some money out of Germany, and that she baked a bread or challah and put inside some money and cut the first 2 slices. And while she was on the train, so she had the bread with her that was already cut up. And I guess they tried to get out some money because she went at that time to what was Palestine.
Your mother went?
Yeah.
On her own?
On her own, yes.
And then came back?
And then she came back. So that must have been very early days.
What do you know about that trip and where she went and who she was in contact with?
I don't know. All I remember, she would bring back these huge, it's something to eat, of course. I forgot the name this moment. Helga.
And were there family members who'd gone to Palestine?
You mean from my family?
Yeah, from the broader extended family.
No, only my mother. And maybe she also went to Poland to take something for the family over there. It's possible that she made more trips. But it was always my mother making the trips.
And when she was on a trip somewhere, who looked after you and your sisters?
I guess my father was there, and my sister was almost 12 years older than I was. So, but then she was 16, 17.
And do you remember, or who would you have said was a kind of important or influential person in your life at that time?
My older sister.
Dora?
Yeah.
And tell me about that. In what way?
She was like a second mother to me. She spoiled me. That's all I can say.
How about your middle sister? What was relations like with her?
The same as now. She's still alive. She's almost 6 years old, as I mentioned, and she's in Brazil, and I'm here, and we talk almost every day, and it's a good thing that I'm here and she's there. And we get along, more or less. I guess there was always some envy or jealousy.
And growing up as a young girl in Berlin, what would the expectations of you have been in terms of, your life's path?
At that age, you don't think about that. Not when you're 6, 7, or 8 years old.
And what were the things you were thinking of?
I don't know what I was thinking of, but I remember doing something very bad because I had a beautiful doll, and I remember sitting next to a fireplace that was on and sitting on the floor and putting that doll next to me, and there's that metal thing that you mix the coals around. I don't know what you call it.
I know what you mean.
Anyway, it's a metal. And I remember putting that thing till it became red and making holes on the head of my doll. How the whole house didn't catch fire, I must have known it was something bad because I hid the doll in the little carriage and I covered it up, which of course was found eventually, and I was punished never more to get the doll.
And who punished you?
My mother.
And what memories do you have of her at that time, in those early years?
I was the favorite child, but in those early years, I guess that she was more of a disciplinarian.
In what ways did that come out?
Well, as an example, the doll, she had the head redone of the doll, and it was given to a child because eventually we went to France before going to Brazil, made a stop there, and there was a relative, and she gave the doll to the child over there.
Were there other rules you remember from those days that were important?
No, I don't remember.
Do you remember any sort of books or stories that were really meaningful to you as a young girl?
Yeah, there was one book called Strawberry Paper, and then there were the story of Grimm stories. And those were really grim in retrospect. How do you tell children such stories?
Going back to what we were talking about, or what you were telling me about earlier, that first time when the kids attacked you basically and slapped you. I'm wondering what your sort of awareness was of what was happening at that time in terms of why they did that, what that meant.
Because I was Jewish, but the safety was being together with the family. So it was all repressed. Obviously not enough.
And the school that you went to briefly in Berlin, was it a public school or was it a Jewish school? What do you know about that school?
I don't know too much about it anymore.
Were there uniforms?
No.
And you mentioned Kristallnacht. Do you remember what happened? Did anything happen to the building where you lived?
Not to the building where I lived, but must have been very close by. If there were any stores or anything, that he smashed everything up. Yeah, I remember seeing swastikas. And I remember seeing Juden.
And how did that make you feel?
I don't know anymore.
The time when you ended up in hospital with the and got the infection, what exactly caused you to end up in hospital in the first place? Was it an accident or something else?
No, I had fallen down. It was nothing that turned into something very big. And that since it didn't have antibiotic and it was getting from bad to worse, it was completely infected, everything. I ended up in the hospital.
And what happened next after that period?
After that period, I believe my father had decided, who knows when exactly, probably around that time, that it was time to go, to take his family and to go.
Had he ever been arrested before that time?
No. He managed to escape. He had connections, and I guess they must have told him always.
And what kind of arrangements did he start to make? What do you know of those arrangements?
I guess all the papers and everything because we still managed to take some furniture to Brazil, a refrigerator, a radio. And I know this because my father and my mother, they had some diamond rings and things, and they hid it inside the radio, where they have all the bulbs, and they had it in those days, all the bulbs and everything. Because I remember when I was in Brazil, my parents being very anxious when the truck came with these things to look at that radio.
You mentioned you went to France first. Was the plan always to go to Brazil, or did it change on the
My
way?
father had a half brother in Brazil, and that's how we emigrated there.
And what was the half brother's name?
Herman.
And tell me, what you remember of leaving Berlin.
We made a stop in France, where my mother had a brother, but the brother wasn't there, only his wife and child. And that's the child that got my doll. And from there, from Le Havre, that support, we went to Brazil. We took a ship and we went to Brazil.
Do you have any sort of memories or feelings about leaving the home that you grew up in?
None. All I remember is that they told you that my skin was still very delicate's not a word, sensitive maybe, from old infection, and I had to take a vaccine, and I wasn't supposed to say that it was bad or it hurt while it was happening because we might get all stuck. How unfair.
Was that in Germany before you left? Or?
Yeah.
Was there anything special that you took with you? Any dolls or particular things special to you that you took with you?
Nothing.
And how did you get to Le Havre from Berlin? Do you remember?
No.
And do you remember getting on the ship?
I remember being on the ship, not getting on the ship.
Tell us about that.
It was a nice ship. It had nice meals. And I think I had a good time there. But after that, I only remember arriving in Brazil.
What was the name of the ship? Do you know?
Don't know.
And who was with you?
My family. Mother, father, my sisters.
Did you know anyone else that you went with?
No.
Any memories of the journey in terms of, was the weather okay? Was it a rough ride?
Don't remember. It wouldn't have been anything negative or anything that stood out that I remember. Very nice or very bad.
And then tell us what you remember about arriving in Brazil.
That was kind of dramatic. We didn't speak the language. The climate was different. It was like almost like going to a jungle.
In what way?
I guess Germany looked more civilized. We're talking about over 85 years ago in Brazil. Not that it's so civilized now, with all the crime and everything that's going on now.
Do you have a visual sort of picture of what you saw and what that felt like to you that you could tell me about?
I remember my uncle being there when we arrived, and I remember him saying that I had lost my front teeth. I guess at age 8 you lose your teeth, or maybe I was late losing my teeth, I don't know. And I think maybe we stayed for a little bit with my uncle before we rented a place, our own house where we all stayed.
And whereabouts was that?
That was in Rio, in the suburbs.
Do you remember the name of the suburb?
Grajaú,
And did you happen to remember the street? Or?
Uberaba.
And tell us about the house there.
It was a nice house, a nice neighborhood. There were kids on the street. I became friends with the children on the street. I remember the father of one of the child teaching me how to ride a bike. And I guess it was a happy time for me. I didn't have much because I didn't know. It never was missing food on the table. We always had food on the table. I remember my mother hiring a person. We had a sewing machine, and she would make little clothes for us. My mother making Shabbat and putting the candles on Friday. And the first year, or couple of years on Yom Kippur, they would sleep downtown at the hotel, not to have to take a car. But then it appears that they saw the rabbi eating on a side street. And after this, they decided if the rabbi is eating, we don't need to stay downtown anymore. And that was the end of that. We were not kosher or anything like that. Nothing.
What was it like learning Portuguese?
I didn't open my mouth. I wouldn't talk at all. I remember going to school and crying desperately because I didn't understand, and they just threw me in school, and the kids would laugh. And I wouldn't open my mouth till I was completely fluent. And by then, nobody even knew I knew any other language.
How long did that take, do you think?
Probably not too long. Children learn fast.
And what was the school you went to?
It was a Jewish school. But then they put me in another school that was not Jewish. It was called Lafayette, Institute Lafayette. And then there was always an hour when the kids had catechism, and I was allowed to leave the room and jump around and be happy. So I didn't have to stay for that.
Were there any other
No,
kids with you?
no,
So you were the only Jewish kid? That's cool.
yeah.
Was this still kind of elementary school age, or was this?
Yeah.
Tell me how how the lifestyle in Rio de Janeiro compared to Berlin.
I don't know if I can make any comparison, really. Because there's no comparison. It must have been harder for, of course, for my parents and for my older siblings.
And who did in this new home where you were in this suburb, who did you and your parents kind of socialize with?
Eventually there were people that my parents had helped, that had business in Germany, and they also landed up in Brazil with their children.
What was their name?
One was Kelson with a K, and the other I can't remember. I can't remember now. But there were a few couples.
Did your parents, stay connected with the Jewish community in Brazil, or how did they, what was their social life like?
They're friends that they knew from before.
So there were people from Berlin.
Yeah.
So German speaking? And did you continue to speak German?
Became like, I don't know how it became Yiddish speaking, German speaking, because I completely understand Yiddish as also German, and some words of Portuguese, so there was a mixture of all the language. My parents learned Portuguese, but never like their children. They were too old to learn, even though they still were young, but it wasn't the same thing anymore for them.
How did the racial diversity in Brazil strike you coming from Berlin?
I think I felt safe being in Brazil. I don't know what else to say.
Did you feel welcome at all when you arrived?
I didn't think about being welcome or not welcome. It just was.
Was there any sense of relief that you were out of the the anti-Semitic environment?
I don't know. I'm sure it was for my parents.
And did you experience any anti-Semitism in those early years after you arrived?
No, the only difference is that we had neighbors that were not Jewish. There were a couple of young men of each side, and my sister started going out with those people, and that was absolutely a war in my house between my parents and my sisters. How could you do this from what we escaped? So it was quite a different situation for them as for me as a child.
And how did you feel about it, looking at all this happening around you?
It didn't make me happy, to say the least. No, it didn't.
And with you and your friends, who were they? Were they Jewish, non-Jewish, both?
Both.
And tell me a bit more about life in school in the early days and through secondary school and that time.
It was a happy time. I had a couple of good friends, and that was enough. A movie on the weekend, going to school, coming back home, studying, doing my homework. That's it.
And do you remember these friends' names?
Yeah, one was Adelia, and the other was Bertha, and Bertha eventually became my sister-in-law.
Through your marriage or through?
Well, I married her brother.
And what movies did you like at that time going to see?
Whatever was showing at the time, I would sit through it twice. Whatever, they were all good. And I listened a lot to radio, to music, and to, how do you call novellas? Like stories that they tell, like The Shadow and whatever. And I used to buy comic books when I was in school. Whatever.
Which ones do you remember?
It used to be called Chibi and X9. It wasn't X-rated.
And what was the music you liked?
Music from America, popular music, Hit Parade. In those days, they had Hit Parade.
And what connection do you have with family or extended family in Brazil?
Cordial.
Did you visit regularly with them?
Yeah.
Where did they live?
Not too far from where we lived.
And you mentioned that your parents stopped going to that synagogue after they saw the rabbi eating the street food. But at home, did you continue to, have holidays and Shabbat
Yes.
and things? Tell us about what you remember of that.
I don't think we had anything much. I mean, we didn't eat shrimp and lobster or pig. Absolutely not. Did we have Shabbat? I don't even know if we continue having that after a while. Maybe for a while. Not continuously.
Are there memories of any other holidays, high holidays that you observed then?
As long as my parents lived, we only used to visit them on the high holidays, in which they would show up their children with pride, and everybody would be outside the synagogue showing off their new clothes. And that's what it was in those days.
And you mentioned earlier about birthdays. How were birthdays in Brazil?
They were still big, not as big as I remember in Germany. We still had birthday cakes and we still got presents. But it was more in moderation.
Did you have any, while the war was going on, or in the period after you left, before the war started, and after that, did you have any contact with any family back in Europe?
No.
And can you talk about your awareness of what was going on in Europe during the war?
We didn't have too much news. So I wasn't aware of too much. And maybe as a kid, I wasn't too interested.
When did you find out?
Find out what?
Well, one, about the Holocaust, but two, what happened to family members who stayed?
I guess over the years. Can we put it on hold for a moment?
Yes, absolutely. I wanted to ask a little bit more about, the community that you were in Rio, and like to describe it. Were you part of the Jewish community? Were you kind of separate? What was your kind of immediate environment? And
More part of the Jewish community. Yeah.
And within the broader Jewish community, were there kind of, a German Jewish community and a Polish Jewish and a Russian Jewish, or was it all kind of mixed up together?
No.
And when you got together, what languages did you speak?
A mix of languages. German, Portuguese, Yiddish.
And can you tell us about some of the events that would bring you together?
Probably holidays or birthdays. Mostly, I think it was just a family being together.
And did each of your family adjust to life in Brazil the same way, or was it different between different family members?
I think it must have been hard for my parents in retrospect. I know it was very hard for my father as for my mother.
In what way?
Well, my father came from being well connected, well to do, to having to start from scratch in a new country with a new language, with a wife and 3 kids. It must have been so hard for him. And as a kid, did I know about it? Did I appreciate it? I know about it after I became an adult, but as kids, we take everything as it comes, take it for granted.
And what did your father do for work in Brazil?
He went back to textile, but he went from door to door rather than being his own owner of what he had. He went from door to door. And after that, slowly, he let that go and he went into the jewelry business. He didn't have a jewelry store as such, but he was dealing with jewelry and selling jewelry. So life became much easier.
And your mother, what was the transition from one country to another, new culture like for her?
It was hard for her. She cooked, she cleaned, she fed us, she shopped.
And your sisters, talk about your older sisters. You mentioned that they dated, or one of them was dating somebody next door.
Both of them were dating. They were always dating. But eventually, each of them got married. My older sister, that was like my second mother. I think my mother was a little jealous of her and of the feelings that I had for her. And she then had a child, and she got hit by a bus and she died. And by then I was 15 years old. And the child lives in Brazil. It's my favorite nephew. And I'm his favorite aunt.
How was that for you and your family going through that?
Can't even imagine. My mother had cancer, my father had diabetes and heart disease. My mother died, she was in her mid-50s, 57. My father died, he was 69. And here I am at my age, and my sister even 6 years older than me. And I wonder if the shock that I had, if it had something to do with it.
How old was your sister's son when she died?
He was a baby. She saw it was a bus that wasn't supposed to be, that was going to the garage. and she was holding the child, and she threw him away. So she must have felt something, because the instinct of a mother is to hold on to the child. She threw him, and the people on the street picked him up without a scratch, and she just... And they had just come from visiting us, and I usually would walk with them up to the bus stop. And that day I didn't, and forever I was thinking, if I had taken them, maybe it would have delayed them more. And that always stayed with me. If, there's no if in life.
Can you tell us some more about, around about this time, you growing up and your life at this time and after this time in Brazil?
I believe it changed my life because it became a very sad situation at home. And as I mentioned, I had my friend Berta, and she had her brother that was 6 years older. And she used to come visit me, and I used to go to her house, and that's how it started between her brother and me. And they had lost their father. So, as they say, one thing led to another. And by the time I was 17, I got married.
And what was your husband's name?
Moses.
And last name?
Milstein.
Tell us about him.
His whole family from his mother's side, they were from Russia. And he's the only one that didn't become a doctor. They were all doctors and professionals. And my mother-in-law used to tell me, make him go. And I said, I cannot make him do what he doesn't want to do. And unfortunately for him, he was left some money, which was enough for him not to go to work. There was not enough to live very well, but it was enough. It was just about enough. And then during the war, I remember that he used to work a lot with crystals that they used to pick up in the ocean. And he used to cut them and sell those crystals. It was a wartime for the war. I don't know for what they used them.
And did you have any children with him?
I had one daughter. Her name is Dora. And I remained married for about 7 years. And then we divorced.
And how was that, getting divorced at that time? How was that for you?
Getting divorced is never easy. And in Brazil in those days, to be a woman alone with a child, and if they would see me with somebody walking, they would run to my father and tell him. we saw your daughter with a man. And my father would say, well, she was out, wasn't she? So it wasn't easy.
You mentioned earlier that your father was very against your older sisters dating non-Jews. Did you ever date a non-Jewish man, and how did he react to that, if he knew?
Well, it just happened that Moses was Jewish, and her boyfriend before happened to be a medical student, and he was Jewish. And so that was that.
And I wanted to ask, what life was like in Brazil, in terms of there was a lot of political changes at different times in Brazil. There was Getulio Vargas, and then there was, a series of other people at different
Yes.
times. Do you have memories in terms of the sort of politics and how those affected daily life?
Well, you get very influenced by the teachers that you have. So at that age, 14 or 15, we were all communists. Did we know what communism was, leave alone those days? I had no idea. So that's what happened. And that was the time of Getulio Vargas, as you mentioned.
Do you remember any particular leaders or figures that you liked or looked up to at that time?
Well, at that time, with Getulio Vargas, there was another one. He was the communist, but I wish I could remember his name. I don't remember his name anymore.
And did your parents share these beliefs, or did they?
No.
Were there any of the presidents at that time who you liked more or disliked more?
No.
And tell me, in terms of daily life, did you work being a single mother? What happened to you? Did you live at home, or how did you make?
Well, my mother had cancer, and the plan had been that we would be together, which I knew it would never happen. She didn't know it. So my father helped me out. In those days, it was not so much from the place where we were coming that a woman would go out to work. I had 2 jobs. Eventually I did go. My father came to live with me, and that kind of completed it for me and for my little daughter at the time. We became a family. And I went to work for a short period of time at a little boutique. And then after that, perhaps even before that, I worked for H. Stern, which was the biggest U.S. jewelry place in Brazil. They have it all over. And I didn't last there too long because at the time they had different showrooms, and people used to go to the ships and bring all the tourists in. And then you start showing them the very inexpensive things and slowly get them accustomed to all the jewelry and the stones. And then you go a little bit higher up and higher up and higher up. And I remember they encouraged people to take out the tourists at night or go to dinner, and I refused to go, and I didn't last too long on the job.
And you told us what happened to Dora. But how about your other sister, Clara? What was she doing at this time?
She got married and she had her kids. And her husband, Jewish.
Did they live nearby?
Not very close, no. But we saw each other quite often. There was not another sister left, so it was just the two of us.
And how was it raising Dora at this time?
It was not easy for me.
Tell me, how much longer did you live in Brazil for?
I lived in Brazil till the age of 30.
And what led you to leave Brazil?
I met my husband, who was a friend of my sister, and he made several trips, and eventually I came to the United States to get married, and I got married in the United States.
And before we leave Brazil, how would you describe the impact Brazil had on your life?
I was okay while I was there. I don't have too fond memories since I lost there my father, my mother, my sister, my divorce. And that was the end of that. And after 30, I'm most of my life here in the United States. First in New York and for the last 50 years in California.
By the time you left Brazil, did you consider yourself Brazilian? Would you have back then?
I didn't consider myself Brazilian. My papers were Brazilian. I didn't consider myself a German. I couldn't consider myself an American. And actually, I was stateless because since my parents were born in Poland, I think the German didn't recognize me as being German. So I guess I'm a mud. From all the places where I lived, which I stayed 9 months in India because my husband Derek had some business in India. So I was familiar with India, Pakistan. I visited Hong Kong and all those places. Anybody that has to complain anything for the United States should go and live somewhere else and then come back and be happy for what they have.
Do you remember arriving in the journey to the United States? Can you tell us about that?
It was kind of dramatic because I took a plane, and after flying 12 hours, somebody said that the sky is looking too blue, and then the pilot said that the undercarriage of the plane wasn't functioning, and therefore he was flying over Rio all those hours to get rid of all the fuel. And so he would try to land back in Rio. And I had left my daughter with my sister to get married in the United States to meet my husband. And I remember looking out the window and seeing firework and ambulances racing after the plane, and the plane too scared to land. And he tried going up again and trying some 2-3 times till he finally landed. Journalists, ambulances, everything running. And it was okay. And I knew then either I catch the next flight right away or I will never do it anymore. And I got the next flight.
How was that flight?
I'm here.
And how long till your daughter joined you?
It was supposed to be not too long, but it became too long. It became 6 months till I went back to Brazil. And then I was pregnant with Daniela.
Before we get to your second daughter, tell me a little bit about your husband, your second husband.
He was a nice person. Somebody you would describe as a nice guy. And we were married for 54 years, fighting our way through, on and off.
Where was he from originally?
He was born in India, but he grew up in England. He went to boarding school, and I had the result many times on his life in boarding school. It wasn't too good for him.
Was he Jewish?
Yes.
And was his family originally from India, or how did he come to
His
be born?
father was from Egypt, his mother from Baghdad. And they had a big business in India, pharmaceutical business in India.
And where did you live with him in the US? Where did you settle?
We lived in New York on 72nd Street. And we went back to Brazil, where I had Daniela. And then went back to New York again. And then finally, by the time Daniela was about 6 years old, we came to California.
And what brought you to California particularly?
Business.
I wanted to ask, you mentioned earlier on that you hated the cold when you went to the winter resort, and I imagine the winters in Berlin weren't mild. How was it living climate-wise in Brazil and then in California?
Well, I didn't like the cold in New York. It's a bitter cold when the wind is there. It's a heavens forbid with the wind. But I loved when it snowed, and I always looked forward, if it was a weekend, going to the park in the snow. I thought it was beautiful, the bare trees, which nobody could understand since I grew up with everything green always in Brazil year round. So to me, that contrast of those bare trees and the snow, I thought it was beautiful. I didn't like the people in New York. I thought they were extremely rude. They wouldn't hold the door. They would just let it slam in your face. And after a while, I took pleasure doing the same. So, what can I tell you?
And how's life been in California since you arrived here?
Loved it here till the first earthquake, and then I wanted to run back to New York.
The Northridge earthquake?
Yes.
Tell us about that. What do you remember of that?
I don't know if there was a smaller one before, but then the Northridge earthquake. How many years ago was the Northridge earthquake?
Nearly 30. I mean, wait, 94, wasn't it?
Well, by then I already had moved. Yeah, the Northridge earthquake. Yeah, it was terrifying because I remember that Derek was not afraid when it would shake before, but that time he became scared. And it gave me pleasure to see him scared too, because I was always very scared and the whole house shook. Yes, and I've been scared ever since. It's like it stayed in my bones. It's not that I'm afraid to die. I'm afraid of the process. I don't want to be buried alive. So I guess that's everybody.
You mentioned earlier about, well, actually, tell us a little bit before about your daughter, Daniela, growing up with her.
She always had a mind of her own. She still does. We live together now. After Derek died, I was on my own for 6 months, and then they decided to come and live with me. And it wasn't too easy at the beginning to adjust, and I wouldn't know how to do without them now. And having Alex with me is, I can't even describe it to you. Love him to death.
You mentioned earlier about going back to Germany. Tell us a bit more about that, what that was like for you.
I went back a total of 3 times. The first time with Derek, it was more difficult. Each piece of soap I would see, I would think that did they really make out of the Jewish fat or whatever soap? And I wasn't very happy then. And then the next time I went with the kids, and it was a bad experience. And do I wish to go back to Brazil? Absolutely not. I went back a few 3-4 months ago, second time. But there's a draw always to Germany to get me back there. Whether because I was born there, whether it's the language, whether it's the first thing. I'm always ready to go back there, but not to Brazil.
And can you talk about, how do you think it's impacted you? You had these really awful experiences as a child, being attacked and, these abusive, anti-Semitic things as a very young child happen to you. And yet you're drawn back to this place. Can you talk about the impact of those early years of your life on you as you've gone through your life?
You mean my early years in Germany?
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know the impact it had on me, and I don't know why the draw is back. Because I remember the streets, the garden, some of the good things. I used to shop with my mother, and the man used to give me a live fish, which I put in the bathtub to swim in the house. So I have little memories of little happy things. Why I had my adult life in Brazil, but I have no wish to go back there. I mean, I went a few months ago to visit my sister. It's the last time. That's it. Europe always pulls me back.
Since the time that you left, Nazi Germany, either in Brazil or in the US or anywhere else you've been, have you had any personal experiences of anti-Semitism at all?
I don't think so. But it's not happy to hear what's going on now and where that's going to go.
Yeah, what's your perspective on what you see and hear right now?
I think people are confused with Palestinians and Hamas, and they're mixing up Palestinian and Hamas. Palestinians are people. They're the Israeli people. They're not in politics. The Hamas, I think they should be finished. The Palestinians, I feel as sorry for them as I feel for the Israeli people. I feel very sorry for them. And I feel that I don't know what's going to happen. Who am I to say what's going to happen? With Ukraine, everybody is no concern between, Israel and Ukraine was left wherever. And I think that people don't learn from the past. The past keeps repeating itself over and over and over, and people have learned nothing.
Do you see any parallels between the anti-Semitism you experienced in your early life and the treatment of other groups in other contexts? Do you draw parallels or not so much?
Explain better your question.
Well, I'm thinking, do you see analogies between your experience of anti-Semitism and, other people's experience of other forms of racism, for example?
Yes. Yes. You have it in Africa, and you have it in the United States, and you have the Iranians and the black people and the whatever, and there's so much racism and so much bad going on all over, and it will never stop. I hope it will.
And how about in Brazil?
Well, Brazil was always worse than anything. I mean, black people didn't have any chance. And now they finally got their own voice, and people don't like it. as Jewish people now got their own voice. They don't want to allow this to happen, what happened before.
For you, what significance is there, if any, in sharing your testimony with us today?
Meaning?
Well, is there a meaning? Is there a special reason why you wanted to tell us your story or share your story with us?
Well, actually, I didn't think I had too much of a story, since other people went to concentration camp and had it so much worse. But we all have our little stories, and so maybe Alex's children or Alex's grandchildren one time will see this and be of interest to them.
And what message would you have for them watching it in the future, if any?
I think that people should enjoy every day whatever they have, which is very hard to appreciate what you have unless you lose it. And don't ever look for perfection in anything. That's it.
And just before we finish, are there any final thoughts or things that I didn't ask you that you'd like to talk about before we finish?
Nothing that occurs to me right now.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Helga, please can you tell us about this photo?
This is a picture of my father, and he must have been 18 or 19 years old in Germany.
And how do you come to have this photo?
I got it from my parents.
They took it with them to Brazil?
Yes.
Thank you. Please tell us about this photo.
This is the picture of my parents in Brazil, and they were at a resort in Brazil in summer called Poços de Caldas.
And do you know roughly, approximately when this would have been?
Not really.
40s, 50s?
Probably in the 50s.
Thank you. Please tell us who's in this photograph.
This photograph is of me. I must have been probably maybe 5 years old in Germany, and that's all I know about it.
Thank you. Can you tell us about this photo?
This is my first day in school. I was 6 years old, and I'm holding what they call the Zuckertüte, which was giving children on the first day of school. Maybe they would look forward to something.
And what is that? What was it?
It was full of chocolates and candies and all that things shouldn't be eating. So it was very nice.
And what kind of school was it that you went to?
I don't know if it was a Jewish school or not. I cannot remember it anymore.
Thank you. Please tell us about this photo.
This is a picture of the three sisters my sister Dora. She was almost 12 years older than I was. My sister Clary, she was 6 years older. And myself in the middle.
And
And we're taken in Germany.
do you remember when this photo was taken?
Not really.
Thank you. Helga, please tell us about this photograph.
That's a picture in some resort, might have been close to Czechoslovakia, but I'm not quite sure. There's my mother and myself, and in a place that I didn't used to be too happy because I hate being cold.
And who's in the bear costume?
That was somebody that was there for pictures.
Thank you. Helga, please can you introduce the two people you're sitting next to?
This is my daughter Daniela, and this is my grandson Alex.
And Daniela, would you like to say a few words?
Yes, I'm really, first of all, really proud of my mom that she spoke here today. When this first started, this program in the 90s, and we had heard about it, and I think the idea was really so overwhelming and so difficult. And so I'm really proud that you could come and tell your story. I know you've grown up in a way of keeping things close to your heart and not sharing. And so I know this has been really a big deal doing this. And especially now in today's world and what it means and what all of these stories mean for people in the future to hear are so important. And I'm so proud of Alex too. I mean, we're sitting here 3 generations. I'm in the middle of it. And what I think has also been such a big impetus is Alex at age 17 being so culturally connected and wanting and caring to hear his grandmother's story and what that means for him and understanding that history and all that she has gone through. And I don't want to be repetitive. I don't know if it was told. We were recently in Berlin, Germany together, and also when Alex was younger, 4 years earlier. And to stand where in 3 generations, where my mom, as an 8-year-old little girl, grew up in that same courtyard. Like, how unlikely is that for her family to have survived, for her to be a survivor, to have left in 1939 and to be there, the 3 of us standing there. It's very powerful. So I feel so lucky, so fortunate, a lot of gratitude to be here with Alex and my mom.
Can I ask for you, knowing your mum's story and going to Berlin with her, how was it for you as both a daughter and a mother to learn about her experience?
I think there are so many layers to that question. I have so much empathy and greater understanding of and being a therapist, I understand trauma and the trauma that she experienced. And again, she is and her family, one of the lucky ones, but what she went through and the fear, it's unimaginable. For me growing up in Los Angeles, to not really have experienced a lot of anti-Semitism myself. And then I see for my 17-year-old son and where we are today, a few months out from October 7th, and what is happening in the world today, and how divided and how much it's anti-Semitism in a way that I would have never have imagined. So it is, and especially with Alex being about to go to college too, it's all, there are levels of gratitude and sadness all mixed together.
And Alex, over to you. Would you like to say a few words about your grandmother giving testimony today?
Yeah, like my mom said, I'm really proud of her for being able to do this. I know that it was hard for her to do it, and especially like I know in your family that you weren't talking about this type of stuff as much, and still you didn't want to do this as much, but I'm really proud that you were able to come out here
Thank
today and do it anyways, because it's so important that we do talk about this stuff and that these stories are preserved.
Can you tell us a bit about some of the research that you've been doing and what the kind of things you found?
So it started off a few years ago, our first trip to Berlin when I was younger, and visiting my grandmother's old apartment where she lived in Berlin. And then after that, I wasn't doing much, but then the past few years or so, I started looking more into her past, looking for records and stuff, and that's how I think we got a photo of it, the school registration card of my grandmother. And so going back to Berlin more recently, this January, we were able to actually visit what used to be her old elementary school, and it's actually now part of it's a restaurant. It got renovated, but they still have like a plaque in front remembering that it was a Jewish girls' school. And on the inside, they have photos of what the school used to look like. And that was really powerful for me, of seeing like these were some of her classmates, and many of them didn't survive, and she is one of the lucky ones. And that was really powerful to see that. And part of that trip, actually, it was a really weird coincidence, but we visited the house of the Wannsee Conference, and we met a librarian there who had actually just talked to a Holocaust survivor 1 year older than my grandmother, who went to the same elementary school. So it was
Completely
that
coincidental.
that trip was a really amazing trip. Like, not only all the Christmas markets, it was December and January, the food, but learning more about my grandmother, and like being able to see her own history, as well as like even her connection to Wannsee is that she used to go there as a child in the summer. It was like a lake area, and that would be like their summer vacation. And what it turned into, how that was where the Nazis implemented the final solution.
And I want to add, too, that what Alex has done and his research, and not just for his age, but just for anybody, He's put together a resource website, and part of that too is that the three of us are about to get our German passports, and he has figured out what people can do, what descendants, second, third generations, to from reparations to getting EU passports, to memorializing I say it incorrectly, the Stubelstein.
Go ahead.
Stubelstein.
Which are the plaques that memorialize what have happened to families, whether they were murdered or had to flee. So we're on a wait list for that. But Alex has really spearheaded all of that. And again, so he continues third generation, the legacy that continues on.
Yeah, and that's been like discovering new documents. It's been a really interesting process from so many different sources, looking through archives, and even through the German consulate in LA, through trying to get the German citizenship. We were actually able to get my grandmother's birth certificate, which she hasn't had. She doesn't remember having since. Do you ever remember having it in Brazil or anything?
No.
And they were able to find it in the archives, the city archives of Berlin. And so even finding that back, getting like these little pieces of her story back have been really special to me.
And that she was a citizen of nowhere.
That's what I said.
Yeah, she'd always, did you think that you were German, or did you know at all, or?
No, we went through this. I'm not German, I'm not Brazilian, not American.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
so what am I?
Exactly.
And Helga, before we end the interview, any last thoughts with your family members here? Any last words?
I'm so lucky to have them. I'm grateful every day.
We are.
Mm-hmm. And especially getting to live with you. It's been a fun experience.
So much.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, Helga. Thank you, Daniela. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.